Thank you everybody for coming to today's special presentation. Today's special presentation is to celebrate the third anniversary of the Joan Lok Art Online. And I decided to actually talk about, people that I really admire that inspire me in my art journey. And they are the founders of the Lingnan School of Painting. And some of you who are my students and artists who join my online courses would know that I every other month for people who enroll in my class and do the online painting, I also want to make sure that there's a possibilities to create a community, to interact and also to answer question live. So every other month I conduct a Zoom Q&A, so people can ask me questions. It could be technical one related to the courses or general questions, and I'll answer them. And then I will actually post the recording in YouTube. So not only the artists that enroll in my classes, but other artists can benefit. It somehow evolved and from a Q&A, and now it become more an informational and kind of like a discussion of technical items. And recently we have just talked about the construction of a typical soumie brushes and how to select good brushes and things like that. So if you are new to my channel, do go to YouTube, subscribe and like. I never ask people to do that, but then, like if you have not done so, subscribe and like, it probably supposedly would keep it going. I have no idea what it really does, but this is the first time I ask people to subscribe and like, so go ahead and do that. So let me go directly into what we are going to do today. So let's do this. All right, so we are here to talk about the life and art of the founders of Lingnan. And as I mentioned earlier, is to celebrate the third anniversary of my online workshop. And so what I'm going to cover today is, of course, is the life and art of the three founders. And they are Gao Jian Fu, Gao Qi Feng, and Chen Shu Ren. And besides talking about them, I think it's necessary to talk about the context of how the Lingnan School of Painting were created and what kind of time and environment they were in. So I think that, that's kind of very interesting, because one of the reasons that I want to talk about them is that a lot of people, especially you're talking about, look at their birthday, they exist over 100 years ago. And because of, like the timing, like sometimes, part of history is forgotten. And then especially since they are artists, what they left us are mainly their artwork. So we may be able to access their artwork, especially now with online access. We may be able to find images of their masterpieces. However, part of history, part of the environment that they created it, the reason why the Lingnan School of Painting are found, and all those very interesting but important elements may have been lost or faded away. So I want to have these opportunities to let more people know who these great artists were, and also like peek into like a little bit of their life. And I have to say that if you know more about them, you will be completely at awe as to like how great these three individuals were, right? So, and some of you who know me would know that I used to work for a federal agency. So I do presentation all the time. And then a lot of times before we do presentation, we always have disclaimer. And I found it necessary to do that today, because I want to make sure that, today's presentation is intended for educational purpose only. There's no assumption of any liability or responsibility or for any error or omission in the content. And besides, because of the timing, we are unable to actually cover all aspects of their life and give samples of all their masterpieces. So, and in addition, you probably know that initially I was thinking of talking about the Gao brothers, but after feedback from my student, I decided to include all three founders. So because of that, this particular presentation is extended from the usual 40 minutes to 1.5 hours. But even in 1.5 hours, I really don't think I have enough time to cover these 3 great artists. So there may be omissions. And then if there are any opinion expressed, it does not represent will of any organizations, individuals, or communities. And please do not distribute this without express written permission from me. Okay, and a little bit about our sponsor, which is my Joan Lok Art Online, and it's a online workshop. And most of the classes are affordably priced at $35, which is very affordable for beginner and also experienced artists. And as I mentioned earlier, I also have a free Zoom event every 2 to 3 months to talk about techniques and skills. And if you are not interested or not available to take the classes, but want to support the effort that I do to educate and share the joy of sommelier, a donation is also welcome to support. And in order to celebrate the 3rd anniversary, I also have 2 popular courses, one of painting tulips and poppies, the other one of the basic of doing texture for rocks and mountains. And they were $38 and $35, and they were all reduced $10 each until the end of only this month. So if you are interested to give it a try, do come to the link in this video or email me. And of course, today's special presentation is also part of the anniversary celebration. So let's get started about the time of where we are in. All right. The birth of the Lingnan School of Painting. Well, when you really think about it, it's just like Impressionism. It's not something that the Impressionistic artists in Paris, in Europe at that time, go and say, okay, let's start a movement called Impressionism. It's basically something that happened that somehow, they were kind of grouped together and named something. So before we even talk about the forming of the Lingnan School of Painting, let's think 100 years back. You are talking about the beginning of the 19th century, the end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century. And some of you who may be aware of Chinese history or aware of the history of globally, what happened around 100 years ago, you will know that that is actually a very stormy time in China. And a little bit of historic background. China was imperial rule, meaning that is a regime with kings, all right, which is actually quite typical for all the nations around the world at that time. Historically, at that time, it was during the Qing dynasty. Qing dynasty, found in 1644 and ended in 1912, was what we call the Manchu League. And if you are into the Chinese history, there are different kind of ethnic groups, and most of the Chinese consider themselves Han Chinese, and Manchu Chinese, in a way, is looked at by the majority of the population as barbarians or foreigners. So in a way, the Han Chinese will look at, or they look at themselves as being ruled by foreigners. So you can imagine the kind of rebellions and resistance of your own ruling party. Another thing is that this is the imperial rule, but in Chinese history, this is not the only imperial rule that is ruled by the non-Han. There's also another dynasty that's ruled by the non-Han Chinese. But then another thing is the Qing dynasty is also the last of the imperial rule in China. After that, it actually become a republic, and there's no more kings or queen or emperors. And going further into the last year of the Qing dynasty, you look at it, 1644. So it has been ruling China for 200 plus, almost 300 years. And during that time, there were ups and downs. But at the end of the Qing dynasty, in the turn of the century, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, China is faced with various, very severe natural disaster. And when I talk about natural disaster, that include the famine caused by flood, famine caused by drought, famine also caused by insects, eating all the crops. So you can imagine, China is an agricultural country, and if you have famine, with drought, with flood, and also with insect, you basically lost your food supply. So you think about the livelihood of individuals. So you have big disaster, you have economic mismanagement. And that is actually a very nice word that I use. But basically, you're talking about government corruption, okay? Mismanagement of funds, including corruptions. And then you have the elite disconnect, similar to the French Revolution, when you have kings and queens and emperor that thought that with the peasants doesn't have bread, they can eat cake. That's similar to the elite disconnect that we have in China. We have the ruling class that have all the wealth in the world. And then you have the farmers and the fishermen that, because of natural disaster, actually have nothing to eat. And we're eating the root, like that they can dug up, in the desert, in the drought, So you're talking about, big disconnect. And of course, as I mentioned, because the country was ruled by what the Han Chinese look at as barbarian ruling them, foreigner ruling them, there were lots of rebellions. And some of them were very big. Some of them were so big that it's almost collapsed the country. But then even it was, kind of like calm down, but then, the damage has been done. So there were many, many various rebellions, all right? But on top of that, there were also attacks by many, many countries. And one of them, we collectively call them the Eight Nation Alliance. And when you think about who are the eight nations, I actually wrote it down in the presentation. You have Austria-Hungary, you have the British Empire, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Russia, and the United States. When you really think about it, over 100 years ago, these eight countries are attacking China, trying to get a piece of it. So when you really think about it, it's basically the rest of the world want to get a piece of China. So you can imagine how the people are living. Disaster, corruption, elite disconnect, rebellions, and also attack from foreigners, trying to get a piece of it. That's the time that Chinese are facing at the turn of the 18th to the 19th century. And then what is Lingnan? Just like Impressionism is kind of a painting called the Impression of Sunset, and then become the comment by a reporter, and then somehow call them all impressionistic painting. Lingnan is actually, Ling means mountain or mountain range. Nan means south. Lingnan means south of the mountains. And the reason is because the three masters of the Lingnan School of Painting, Gao Jian Fu, Gao Qi Feng, and Chen Shu Ren, they were all from the southern part of China, from the Guangdong province, south of the mountain range. All right. So these are the three founders. And by the way, on some pronunciation, I'm using the Mandarin pronunciation for their names because today China's official language is Mandarin, and the pronunciation for these names are in Mandarin. So the translated spelling are Gao Jian Fu, Gao Qi Feng, and Chen Shu Ren. But these are all Cantonese. So when they are alive, when the language that they use are Cantonese, so occasionally I would call them Gao Jian Fu, Gao Qi Feng, Chen Shu Ren, right? These are actually how they call themselves in their native tongue as well. And you look at the birthdays, they are actually quite close together on age. Gao Jian Fu and Gao Qi Feng are brothers. They are off by maybe around 10 years. And then Chen Shu Ren is the classmate of Gao Jian Fu, and they are around 5 years difference. So in a way, they are very close in age. So when you think about China having the background that I just talked about, and these individuals at the turn of the century, they are at the height of their youth. They are teenagers in the 20s and 30s. And when you look back to the fall of the Qing dynasty, 1912, and you look at their age, so if really they are in their 20s, 30s, when 20s, 30s, and 40s when this happens. So let's talk about why I admire these individuals so well, besides artists. So let's get into, by the way, I'm doing the Go brothers not because of any particular reason, but Gao Jian Fu is the oldest one. So, we'll just respect our elder and start with him. Gao Jian Fu, everybody know that he is a student of Julian, and I have a rare photo of Julian. This arrow, this elderly man with a beard, this is Julian, and then this young boy, probably around the age of 14, this is Gao Jian Fu, okay, and these are the other students. So let's take a very brief look into Gao Jian Fu. Gao Jian Fu is the fourth son of a humble upbringing, and because of his humble upbringing, he worked as apprentice in relative shops, in his teens. And at one point, he was working with his, a uncle shop. And then his uncle discovered that he actually is gifted in painting and drawing. So his uncle sent him to study with Julian. And Julian at that time, Julian and Ju Chao is the older brother. Ju Chao and Julian has a studio in Guangdong province, which is like the most popular art school at that time. And so Gao Jian Fu's uncle sent him to study with Julian. But then because Gao Jian Fu was very poor, so he had to actually walk from his house to Julian's studio. And Julian observed that Gao Jian Fu is so talented, he actually offered for him to stay with him in his studio to do maybe some odd jobs and stay there so he can actually learn with him. And then another, important figures in Gao Jian Fu's artistic journey is actually a classmate, but then, because of time, we don't have, all the time to talk about all the little interesting things, because at one point he was considered his teacher, but actually is actually his fellow classmate. Is called Wu Dingyi, and then he's a very wealthy man. He was maybe only less than 20 years Gao Jian Fu senior. But then this collector, because in the olden time, there's no museum, you have to be the elite to have collected art from, the masters. And Wu Dingyi actually is a good collector of a lot of work. So Gao Jian Fu has access to a lot of classic work through the we call it apprenticeship, but then in a way is being able to work with Wu Dingyi. And other things about during this time is Chen Shu Ren. Chen Shu Ren, another founder of the Lingnan School, actually met Gao Jian Fu when they were both students of Julian. And I'll talk a little bit about Chen Shu Ren later. And then another thing is that in his teens, Gao Jian Fu, exposed to Julian, found classmate Chen Shu Ren, and also, was under the assistant of a collector called Wu Dingyi. He was able to, access a lot of classic painting. And then, a few years later, he was able to actually study in Macau. And mind you, if you understand the history of the Far East, Macau at that time was ruled by the Portuguese, just like Hong Kong at that time is already a British colony ruled by the British. So Macau was ruled by the Portuguese, so it has a lot of Western influence. This is during that time that he converted into Christianity, and he also was exposed to Western art and culture. And according to document, he learned sketching from a French teacher called Mak Lai, but then because we do not have any a Western language coverage of this, so we only know that the name of this French teacher is Mak Lai. We do not know exactly how to spell his French name. But then fast forward in his 20s, Gao Jian Fu become an art teacher, and then during various teaching assignment, he has a colleague who is a Japanese artist who is teaching art in China, and his name is Yamamoto Bangai, and San Hao Mui. And this particular individual and Gao Jian Fu become very good friends, and they admire each other because both of them do sumie, brush painting on rice paper. So this particular individual Japanese teacher encouraged Gao Jian Fu to study in Japan, and also in his spare time taught him like broken Japanese so he can manage to travel to Japan. And of course, with perseverance, Gao Jian Fu saved up money and then travel to Japan. And this is a photo of Gao Jian Fu when he was in Japan. So you can tell he actually can merge in. I think he actually kind of looked Japanese. He also joined various art clubs, including the White Horse Art Society, the Pacific Ocean Art Society, and the Watercolor Research Society. And this is during that time that he joined the movement of Dr. Sun Yat-sen. And Sun Yat-sen, if you know the history of China, he is considered the father of China because he is the leading force to revolve and turn over the end of the Qing dynasty into the Republic. And then that year in 1906, when Gao Jian Fu traveled to Japan, he's so energized by the teachings that during the summer break, he actually went back to China and brought his younger brother, Gao Qi Feng, to Japan. And then fast forward, during that time, because he also joined Sun Yat-sen's revolution movement, so he joined the revolution force. And between 1907 and 1912, meaning before the collapse of the Qing government, he was involved in a lot of uprisings. And this is not in the PowerPoint, but then he was actively participated in multiple revolutions, including the Golden Man Revolt. And if you are familiar with the Chinese history, around 86 people died, but then 72 of the corpses were located. And but that is one of the movement why energized the entire country to rebel against the Qing government. And the Yellow Mound Revolt happened in 19 let me just double check my thing, is 1911. And then in 1912, the collapse of the Qing government. So that is actually a catalyst. And Gao Jian Fu was not only an artist, he was in various leading positions. As a matter of fact, the reason why he returned to China from Japan is he was assigned by Sun Yat-sen to start the Guangdong chapter of Tongmenghui in Guangdong. And so he was actually a leading figure in the revolution. And according to my research document, he also was in the Jila Gam Amsa Dui, the China Assassin Guild. So you can imagine, what kind of work he does. And we also have story of him hiring explosive underneath his own bed and things like that. So fast forward, after the revolution, he could have become a general or an official, but he decided to revolutionize art and painting because he believed that besides science, besides administrations and agriculture, we need to revolutionize the mind of the people. And the mind of the people is through art and literature. And since, people are still illiterate, so painting would be something that can move individuals. So he did that. He co-founded the True Record with Gao Jian Fu, Gao Qi Feng, and Chen Shu Ren. And then during that time, he also wrote many influential articles about what he called new painting, the revolution modern painting. And then some other typics. He is also the first Chinese that sketched on board an airplane in 1920. And he's also the first Chinese that have a solo show outside of mainland China. And then in 1923, he established a studio called Spring Awakening Art Academy. And by the way, because most people or most of the document translated called Spring Awakening, so I'm honoring that and call it Spring Awakening. But then the Chinese word are Chen Shui Chun Sui means spring sleep, and then is taken from a poet, from a poem during the Three Kingdoms period. And basically it say, 草堂春睡足，窗外日遲遲. What it means is, when you have enough sleep in your, like humble hut, and you look out the window and the day is getting late. But basically the idea of that is, he has no political aspiration. He actually want to not become an officer. And then, of course, fasting forward, that is still a very stormy time. I mean, just the turn of the collapse of the empire does not stop the turbulence in China. There are forces infighting. There are also attacks. And of course, we have the Second World War. We have the invasion by Japan. So we have a lot of things going on. So in 1938, he moved to Macau, which, as I say, is a Portuguese colony. And one very sad thing that happened in 1939, when he was already, I think it's in 60s, his son was kidnapped and was never found, meaning that he probably was murdered. And because of that, his wife also died of a broken heart. And then in 1941, when Hong Kong fell to Japan, the Japanese regime really wanted to recruit him, but then he refused, and he was leading extremely poor life. He was basically starving. And then when the war ended, he returned to Guangzhou. He had the 70th and retrospective show. He continued his Springleaf Academy, Lamzhong, and also there are 3 different academies that he led, 2 in China, 1 in Macau. But in 1949, he decided to return to Macau. And then 2 years later, he died at the age of 73. So that is kind of like a ballpark of his life. But you can imagine in his 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, his life is completely intertwined with the revolution, with the turmoil, and then he is someone of integrity. He would not bow to the foreign enemies. He, like supported the revolutionary movement, and all in all, a very righteous gentleman. Okay, so now let's talk very quickly about his art, because I'm trying to give justice to the other artists too. So first of all, you see, let me this one more, yeah. So I picked this because there are so many masterpieces, but I picked this to illustrate a certain point. In the far left, you have something that is more traditional. This is by Gao Jian Fu, and we probably believe that this is something that is inspired by the teaching of the art training that we receive, and also the viewing of all the Chinese classic landscape. So this is very classic Chinese landscape, typical composition with mountains, waterfall, trees, brooks, and like a vertical compositions. And then one in the middle, you can tell that this is still a very nice composition for landscape, but you will see that it has a very misty background. And I think that is probably, the influence from his Japanese training. And then the third one is his innovation. This is actually a war scene. These are, by the way, these are done in the 1920s. So these are completely new to the viewers, because they are, like broken buildings, and you have lampposts, and these in the 1920s is completely unheard of. And then I also picked these individuals one. These are for the ones you can see that they are mice, trying to grab, a barrel of berries. And you can see that these can only be done with keen observations and sketching of real mice, because you see how 3D they look. And then, as I mentioned, because Gao Jian Fu has converted to Christianity, so in this particular one, you can see that the cross in the back, and then in front we have daylily and various kind of lily in front, and that is also a very new composition and subject matter in the early 19th century. And this particular one, this is done also in the 1920s. And can you tell what are these? These are not birds. These are airplanes. As a matter of fact, they may not even be airplanes. They are warplanes. They are warplanes in the 1920s. He put them in a Sumier painting. So you can imagine how innovative and groundbreaking here is. Okay, one more. Okay. This little koi fish is one of my favorite. And we see a lot of koi fish. Underwater, we'll see like some maybe like lotus weed. But then this particular one is about the spirit of the koi fish trying to break through the ice. So you can see that, he's actually trying to draw ice, a frozen lake. So I found this very interesting. I have not seen this, in Sumier painting before this painting, all right? And then of course, as I say, because when he's active, he's actually doing the war, a lot of suffering. So he has scouts as one of his subjects, but also to want to bring, these are, I think they are some kind of jackfruit. So they are, let's see, share screen. I have a message that someone may not be able to see the share screen. I suggest you go out and go in again, because I do not have any other issues by other individuals. It could be your connections. So maybe go in and go back in again. Thank you. Okay. And then this one, you can see this bird. This is what we are doing now as a typical Lingnan style bird. But then, this is jackfruit, and you see how realistic the rope is for carrying the jackfruit. Oh, by the way, this is another painting, another photo of Gao Jian Fu with his students in one of the art show. And this is a later photo. And I believe this is taken in Guangzhou when, after the war, maybe in 1948 or, around those time when he is in his late 60s and 70s. So that is Gao Jian Fu. And now we have to, let's talk about the second founder of Lingnan. Second founder of Lingnan is called Gao Qi Feng, Gao Qi Feng. And if you look at the age, he's 10 years younger than Gao Jian Fu, because he's from the same family. So in a way, he is kind of like a miniature version of his old brother. They're both from a poor childhood. They're all full of talents. They both study in Japan, and therefore has a lot of influence because Japan at that time has a lot of Western influence. So it's combining the Western Japanese painting skill and technique into the Chinese painting. They are both active in the revolution. So when I talk about Gao Jian Fu active in the assassin team, in hiding explosive under the bed, Gao Qi Feng did exactly the same as well. So they also promoted new painting, established art school, and also have many students. But one sad thing between Gao Qi Feng and Gao Jian Fu is that Gao Qi Feng died young. Gao Qi Feng died in 1933 at the very young age of 44. And I think I have it in the other slide, so I'll say that. He studied in Japan in 1906, as I mentioned, like when Gao Jian Fu was in Japan, after one semester, he immediately went back and brought Gao Qi Feng with him. And then they both joined the Tongmeng Hui, and they also co-founded the True Record. And he established various art schools. They also have influential speeches and exhibitions. By 1925, because Gao Qi Feng, Gao Jian Fu, and Chen Shu Ren, they are having exhibition of what they talk about as new painting, the new San Guohua, new painting. So the people who look at them don't know what to call it. And since these three individuals that have, airplanes in the compositions, have, photorealistic description of the subject matters, and light source, shadows, like a lot of Western influence. They don't know what to call it, so they actually call them Lingnan. So and by 1925, they were already called Lingnan Samgit, the three Greeks from Lingnan. or 2 golds and 1 Chen, right? And then think about the medicine in the 1920s. And I'm sure that, you read books and story about the Second World War. Around the Second World War, pneumonia, the TB, like things kind of like inflammation of the lung can kill. At that time, there's not yet have antibiotics. So when the lung is infected, it's easily killed. And then people get lung infection with their overwork. So, Gao Qi Feng, being such a talented artist, he worked tirelessly at his painting and his teaching. And so in 1929, he fell ill, very ill, and he established a studio called the Heavenly Wind, Tin Feng. And as a matter of fact, if you are into the painting history of Lingnan, there's 6 students of his called Tin Feng Lok Ji or Tin Feng Cat Ji, depending on who you are counting. One artist that I think everyone in US heard of his name is Zhao Xiaoang. Zhao Xiaoang is one of the 6 disciples of Heavenly Wind. He is one of the Tin Feng Lok Ji, but we can talk about Zhao Xiaoang in another presentation. About the passing of Gao Qi Feng. Gao Qi Feng was sick and then he recovered and things like that. And then he was also very active in promoting Chinese art outside the country. And he was actually on his way to Germany for an exhibition. But then, at that time, we go to Germany not by airplane, but by ship. He was trying to board a ship in Shanghai, but he fell on the pier. And then he fell sick, he was hospitalized. And then by falling, electric trigger other diseases and things like that. So a month later, he passed away and he was only 44. All right. Gao Qi Feng passed away at 44, but then his art is not anything less than someone who lived a much longer life. These are the sample of Gao Qi Feng's artwork. And I picked this one on the far left also to show the kind of traditional training, the strength of his brushwork. You see how strong this tree is. And if you have a chance to find the original or an image online to expand it, like there's an expression of a man on a donkey, and then is basically very typical scenery from poetry and classic painting. But then you can tell that the compositions, although it's classic, it also have new elements. And then in the middle one, you can tell the Japanese influence of the Emma spirit elements. And then this particular one, I think some of you who Sumi Society have a show in various parts of the country. And one time we were in a museum in Minnesota. And remember when we were there in the Asian art wing, there's actually a room just of monkeys, chimpanzee monkeys and Gibson. And, like Japanese has a history of painting, Gibsons and in various manners. And you can see here, this is a painting by Gao Qi Feng, and it's of a Gibson. And it is, the fur is so soft that you can almost touch it, but it's only, made with ink. And you can also see the typical Sumier composition of, almost half the painting is white, empty space. Okay, I could pick a lot of different subjects, but I found it kind of interesting. So I decided to pick all, ego painting. But you see that, like sometimes they are color, sometimes they are black and white, but all of them has peaceful facial expressions, very decisive brushwork. But then what I like is actually the feathers. The texture is very strong, but when you look at them, they are actually done by very decisive calligraphic brushwork. And that's Gao Qi Feng. And I think I have one more. Let me see. Yeah. Actually, I also want to mention one more brother. Gao Jian Fu, Gao Qi Feng. They also have a younger brother called Gao Jian Seng. Is the youngest brother, 16-year junior of Gao Jian Fu. Very talented individuals, very similar upbringing, you know, poor upbringing, extremely talented. So when Gao Jian Fu discovered Gao Jian's talent, he also sent him to study in Japan. Unfortunately, Gao Jian died at the age of 23. And it's very hard to find Gao Jian's artwork, but I was able to find one. This one on the right is done by Gao Jian Fu. And this is actually a famous painting of Gao Jian Fu because it depicts the predators, and in a way is a symbolization of the foreign power trying to get a piece of China. You know, that's the symbolism of this painting. This particular artwork is by Gao Jian Seng when he was 21 years old. And you can see that, you know, as I said, you know, because his brother is his teacher, so I believe that, you know, he was, you know, trying to, you know, mimic, you know, some of the brushwork, but he also changed various things like the position of the moon, the background, but this is an artwork of Gao Jian Seng. And let me just show you how I found this. It's so hard to find Gao Jian Seng's work, but then, you know, like I'm a crazy collector of art book, and I have this particular book, which is of a art auction, the Chinese art auction in 2004. And flipping through the pages, I was able to discover, you know, various pieces of Gao Jian Fu, Gao Qi Feng that were being auctioned off. And here is Gao Jian Seng's artwork that I'm able to, you know, like take a photo and then show it in the PowerPoint. So let's get back to our slides. All right, so let's go back to the slide. All right, so after talking about Gao Jian Seng, let's talk about our last founders. Our last founder is Chen Shu Ren. Chen Shu Ren, let me just, I think it's one slide too soon. Oops. Come on. Okay, yeah. Chen Shu Ren. Chen Shu Ren is 5 years younger than Gao Jian Fu. He entered the studio of Junan at the age of 17. And we actually were unable to find a lot of information about his family, whether he's rich or poor, or whether they are merchants or physicians or things like that, because most of the history about Chen Shu Ren start mentioning him when he entered the school of Junan. But it's pretty obvious that Chen Shu Ren was one of the star students of Junan and one of the most beloved students. Because when we look further into Junan's life, Zhu Chao and Junan were brothers. Zhu Chao was the older brother that has married and has a family. Junan never married. Junan was always a bachelor. Zhu Chao passed away because Zhu Chao was, I think, at least 10 or 15 years his senior as well. So when the older brother passed away, he has a family, he has sons and daughters and wives and things like that. But then Zhu Chao become the breadwinner that not only take care of himself, but also the family by Zhu Chao. So he took care of his sister-in-law and all the nieces and nephews. And the youngest daughter of Junan, of Zhu Chao, was called Gui Lam. And Junan has the responsibility to find the youngest niece a good husband. And guess what? He actually married Gui Lam to Chen Shu Ren. So you can imagine that's actually his favorite student. He admired him not only for his art, but for his integrity, for his personality, and his righteousness. So, you know, otherwise he would not marry his grandniece, who is kind of like, you know, almost his daughter to this student. And then coincidentally, in 1906, Chen Shu Ren also went to Japan. He studied in the Kyoto Art Academy. And so in a way, he also did the revolution with Gao Jian Fu and Gao Qi Feng in Japan. And also in 1913, he returned to Japan again to study literature. So because he believed that besides painting, he also need to have more knowledge in order to, to educate the country. So he is also an active member of the political circle of Dr. Sun Yat-sen. But one more interesting thing between the Gao brothers and Chen Shu Ren is that unlike the Gao brothers, that after the revolution, after the end of the Qing dynasty, they dedicate themselves into painting and the teaching of painting. Chen Shu Ren actually remained in the government. He served in various positions, and some of the more prominent one would be the Minister of Civic Affairs in Guangdong, and also the head of the Committee for Foreign Chinese. And he was stationed in Canada for 5 years, in 1917 to 1922. But then both of them have tragic happening in their life. And in 1932, his son Chen Fu, only at the age of 25, died, because of the conflict. I would not interpret more on that, but then is a tragic happening of, just like, the dying of Gao Jian Fu's son because of kidnapping, and Chen Fu's, Chen Shu Ren's son also died because of the conflict. But let's return back to the co-founder. They co-founded the True Record, and then he also wrote very important articles about the new painting. One different things between the Gaos and Chen is also a poet. He, as I say, he's kind of like a modern literati. So he wrote a lot of articles about the new painting, but then the way he wrote it is almost in poem. They are 5 words, or 7 words, 7 words, and then a lot of them are poems. And then he also established. He also active in showing his art. So the two Gaos and Chen, even Chen Shu Ren did not establish any art school. He exhibit with the Gao brothers. They do what you call the fundraiser auctions and things like that. And I personally believe that one of the reasons that he did not, give up the official position is, I believe he's more a strategist. As a matter of fact, if we go into the history of Chen Shu Ren's life, we'll know that he actually joined Dr. Sun Yat-sen before the formation of Tongmenghui. So in a way, he's almost like a co-founder of the movement to overturn the Qing dynasty. And then one side note, I think some of you are into movies of the Far East. If you are into movies of Hong Kong, and I want to bring, you may want to actually go into a little movie called The Bodyguard and Assassin. I think it is in maybe 2009, maybe around 10 years ago, the movie, either 2005 or 2009. But it's a movie called Bodyguard and Assassin. It actually won many, many awards. And that particular story, we are not sure how true it is because it's kind of like a Hollywood version. But then that particular movie talk about Dr. Sun Yat-sen was en route to Japan and passing through Hong Kong. And then he would like to galvanize the people for the revolutionary movement. But according to the movie, the Qing dynasty would send assassins to assassinate Dr. Sun Yat-sen. And then, in the movie, commoners, like beggars, street hawkers, laborers, men together, and then become Dr. Sun Yat-sen's bodyguard. And that's the story. But then, why do I bring that up? Because according to my research, Chen Shu Ren joined Sun Yat-sen's movement because Chen Shu Ren was an editor of a revolution newspaper in Hong Kong when Dr. Shen Yat-sen was en route to Japan, passing through Hong Kong. But because of, as I say, because of the turmoil, he was unable to actually get on board. So according to my research, the story has that Chen Shu Ren and Chen Xiuba were so committed to the movement, they actually bought onto a sampan and went to meet Dr. Shen Yat-sen and sign up to join his revolution movement during that time. So when I watched the movie Bodyguard and Assassin, I can, add my imaginations to it. So if you are interested in Hong Kong movie, just maybe Google and find Bodyguard and Assassins. But that is Chen Shu Ren. He was really dedicated to the movement. He supported Dr. Shen Yat-sen. And if you look at the Chinese history, after the turn of the Qing dynasty, there were actually still a lot of turmoil. There were uprising. There were Dr. Chen Yat-sen movement actually were kind of overpowered by individuals who want to actually claim and become the next emperor. And then, of course, there were the invasion by Japan, and then there were, various government. So Dr. Shen Yat-sen was still trying to help the nation, and the struggle continued. And Chen Shu Ren was by his side, helping him with various positions and, doing a lot of the administrative work. So the Dr. Sun can do a lot of other, movements and work. So one way or the other, fast forward in 1945, that Second World War ended. So in 1947, Chen Shu Ren was, in his early 60s. So he believed that, his duty is done. So he believed that that's about time that he will retire from the official position, since kind of like all the dust has settled. And he would like to, at that time, concentrate in his art. However, unfortunately, a year later, at 64, he passed away. So that is Chen Shu Ren. A little bit different because he continued official positions, but then never have any student. And because of that, we may have his painting, but you may not see a lot of continuation of his style because he never have any art school and have any followers. But so let's look a little bit about his painting. Okay, so I also picked, some typical ones to, to represent various influence. In the far left, you see that we have an ink-only painting with bamboo and a lone bird. All right, so, very typical Sumie painting. But then in the middle, you see the Japanese influence of a nude background with, color everywhere. Very, very almost like photorealistic, very 3D depiction of two geese and flying down on with. But then you can also see that the graphic design of his painting, you have like two really dominant bamboo on the left painting, a kind of like a circular moon that bring attention to the head of the geese in the middle painting. And then the far right, I have a painting of, this is called, this is a particular flower that is unique to the southern part of China and Guangdong. And this flower, they bloom, the flower come before the leaves, right? And then when the flower bloom is full wet. So a lot of times they were called Ying Hong Xu and Ying Hong Fa. And these flower, in the Guangdong symbolism, they represent heroes because they bloom and then they fall, right? So, and then I also want to bring attention to his landscape. Chen Shu Ren, because of his official position, he traveled across the country for official duties. And because of that, he bring his sketchbook. So you can tell these are painting, but these are painting done on site. So you can tell, the compositions is actually quite atypical compared with a typical Sumie landscape. You may not have the texture stroke you see that, you actually don't see a lot of texture stroke because Chen Shu Ren's art is famous for not having the texture stroke in the sumie. You can see, like various brushwork, but then you don't see the dots or the texture stroke, the various ideas that is typical to sumie. But then you see the composition is also interesting. I think I have one more. Yeah. Oops. Come on. Sometimes the mouse is a little bit too sensitive. Okay. And then you see that this is a landscape. But then the landscape, you see that the waterfall, you can tell that is actually quite, the perspective is more Western. You don't have a moving focal point. You actually can imagine the artist is sitting at the bottom of the waterfall looking up. And then this is kind of like a sketch of what he saw in front of him, right? And then for me, of course, I like all his work. But then what I like most about Chen Shu Ren's work is actually his design. His design and his use of strong graphic element in his composition. You see in this painting of willow and peach blossom. The peach blossom is only on the very top corner on the right, and then the willow is occupying the half left. And there's a big divide between the empty space and the space with willow and have lots and lots of fine leaves. So very striking graphic design. And then one more, this is actually one of my favorite. You see, this one is, if you look closer, that is actually a kingfisher, a red kingfisher on the kind of very top of this weed that is rendered in black ink only. But then you have a colorful bird on the upper left corner. So you can imagine, in a art exhibition, from a distance, this is such a striking composition. The contrast between black and white, the contrast between complete emptiness and, lots of black stroke, a little bit of little dot representing the top of the pond, and then one lone kingfisher on the very top. Very, very interesting. Oh, by the way, I just want to share this painting. Remember I talked about Gao Jian Fu. When the Second World War ended and, kind of like peace is again, happening in China, Gao Jian Fu returned from Macau to China to open, 2 more art schools. And then in 1948, on his 70th birthday, he had a retrospective. And then, of course, all his students and all his friends, joined in the celebration. And this is a group photo taken at that time. And the gentleman in the light color suit is Gao Jian Fu. And then the gentleman in a Mandarin color Chanshan is Chen Shu Ren. And this is kind of like in the later age when they were in the early 70s and mid 60s. And when you remember when they died, this is actually 1 year before Gao Jian Fu passed away. So, but then I think it's very typical of their life. Gao Jian Fu Westernize or bring a lot of Western influence into his artwork. And then Chen Shu Ren, although he had a lot of Western influence, but then he maintained, various compositions, various technique, and various elements of the painting. So even their outfit, I think it's so interesting of their personality. So that's my presentation of the 3 founders of Lingnan. And again, I want to, emphasize that this is for educational purpose only. There's no liability or responsibility for error or omissions for the content, and the opinion expressed do not represent the will of any individuals, organization, or communities. And please do not distribute it without express written permission by me. And So I thank everybody for joining me in this presentation of the life and art of the three founders. This afternoon, we'll have an upcoming workshop on painting chrysanthemum. And then I have 5 more workshops coming up, around 2 per month. And if you are interested in the Lingnan style of painting, I will be doing the Lingnan style painting for Azalea next month. And then we'll also do the cloud and mist that focus more on how to do clouds and mist at the bottom of the waterfall or for typical landscape. And then in November, I'll have willows, and also for the fun of it, I will also have a squirrel and pumpkin presentation. And then I welcome not only you, but you can bring your young children, grandchildren, or young artists to join, and email me on the detail. And then in December, out of popular requests, people ask me, can you do something that, if I'm new to sumie, can you do something that I can, come back to the basics? So I'm going to do a bamboo. But because I also know that there are people who have studied bamboo, but also want to bring it to the next level. So just like the chrysanthemum this afternoon, we will do a bamboo, but we'll also add additional elements of doing bamboo. So that's my presentation of the three founders in a nutshell. And if you have any questions, or if you'd like me to go over certain aspect, because I have skipped a lot of the detail of their lives, and if you want me to interpret a little bit more, I can. But these are the three founders, and I admire them not only for their artwork, as you can see, all of their work are masterpieces, but it's on their innovative spirit, not only in doing their painting, adding new subject, airplane, scout, war scene, or ignoring the typical way of painting landscape and do it your own way, bringing all this new spirit to the painting. But it's the individual themselves, their commitment to an ideal, the revolution movement, to help not just themselves, but the rest of the country to come to a new regime, to commitment to the movement, commitment to bring art to the rest of the world. And also, sadly, the personal tragedy, dying young, having their children, die of, suffering unexpected causes, and yet, not be bitten by it, but continue to march on to continue with the things that they were given the mission to do. And those are the things that I admire. So I hope that, this will spark your interest to find out more about these three great individuals, their lives, and their art. Okay, is there any display of their work? Yes. First of all, let's talk about, where they are most of the time, okay? Remember I said that Chen Shu Ren has worked in Canada. He as I say, he married Junan's grandniece, so he has a family. And then although, his eldest son, died, tragically, but then he have other children. So his wife and his children immigrate to Canada. So the family still exists. They are in Canada, and then they are also, his son and his wife. Because as I mentioned, Chen Shu Ren passed away at 64. So his entire life he dedicated himself to teaching. No, not teaching. He dedicated himself to the revolution and also his own painting. He actually did not have any student. So his wife and his child actually did not learn from Chen Shu Ren, but from Jiu Xiuong. Jiu Xiuong has an art school in Macau and then later in Hong Kong. And Jiu Xiuong passed away maybe around 15, 20 years ago. So they actually continue the Lingnan style of painting. And then another thing is when Chen Shu Ren passed away, his wife donated a good number of his painting to the museum in China. So you can find it in Guangdong. And then at I think the 10th anniversary or the, like at a particular anniversary of Chen Shu Ren's passing, his family also donated another good amount of painting to the museum in Hong Kong. So you can find Chen Shu Ren's artwork in Canada, in China, and also in Hong Kong, because the family is in Canada. So there are also collection donated as well. I am not very sure where can you find a good collection of Chen Shu Ren's artwork, because as I mentioned, since he doesn't have a lot of students, because he basically did not really set up an art school and teach, his artwork are not, like you cannot find them that much. So I am not sure whether museum in US have many Chen Shu Ren's artwork. Okay, when it comes to Gao Jian Fu and Gao Qi Feng, as I mentioned, Gao Qi Feng passed away at 44, very young, but he has created a massive amount of masterpieces, and is obviously in China, in Guangdong, and other museum in China. He also have a good collection in the Hong Kong Museum, and I believe Smithsonian also have some of Gao Jian Fu's artwork, because is artwork that they are good artwork, they are great artwork. All right, and then the same thing with Gao Jian Fu. Gao Jian Fu, as I mentioned, his son was kidnapped and murdered, and then his wife died of a heart attack. At that time he has one daughter and one son. Gao Laihua is the daughter, Gao Laiman was the son, and of course the son passed away. Gao Laihua, I actually met her. I'm dating myself, but then I met her around 35 years ago. And then she was already an elderly lady. She was probably in her 90s when I met her in the late 80s and early 90s in New York, Chinatown, because Gao Laihua was also ill when that tragedy happened in the family, when the brother passed away and the mother died of a broken heart. She was also sick as well. So she went to Hong Kong, and then from Hong Kong went to US for medical treatment. And then she actually attended the Columbia University, graduated and stayed. So Gao Laihua was always in New York City. As I say, I met her 30 years ago. She was already in the 90s, so I'm sure that I don't think she's still alive, but then I have met her. And then Gao Jian Fu, because of the passing of his wife, he actually remarried at a pretty elderly age of 60 or 61. And then the second wife gave him another son. And then the second wife is also, I think the second wife is actually his student, a lot younger than him. But then her name is Yongji, and Yongji was still alive maybe 15 years ago, because I was invited in the International Female Chinese Artists exhibition that, and then in that particular catalog that I received, Yongji was at the opening. So Yongji at that time was, also very elderly, 90 plus years old, but those individuals were there. So where are the art? Gao Jian Fu and Gao Qi Feng, because they also auctioned their art to raise money for the revolution. So a lot of their artwork were collected by collectors. And these artwork were also, went to, not just China, but the rest of the country, because they raised funds for the revolution and to fight the war. And so a lot of the artwork were out there. A good collection would be, as I say, in Guangdong province and also in the Hong Kong Museum of Art. But then you will also be able to find it in various museums that have good collection of Chinese art, especially in San Francisco Museum. The San Francisco Museum of Art has them. And I'm sure that, the other museum has as well. One thing I want to mention, we really don't have a lot of their artwork. We actually have more of, I know where's Jiu Xiuang's artwork, or Ao Hounin's artwork, because they are museum and they are university that collaborate with their family. And because of that, a big collection were donated to certain museum, such as if you are interested in Jiu Xiuang's artwork, San Francisco Museum has a really good collection. And because Gao Qi Feng is Jiu Xiuang's teacher, so you also have Gao Qi Feng, Gao Jian Fu, and Chen Shu Ren's artwork in the Museum of San Francisco as well. That's also one of the reasons I have this presentation. I think the history is fading, and because of like other comers actually are even more famous than the founders. Like their artwork are out there, but then like is there like a gigantic collection dedicated to individuals? I am not 100% sure. But then, I'm sure you can find them. As I said, this is 2004 record of auctions, and I can have pages of Gao Qi Feng and Gao Jian Fu's artwork being auctioned off. So you can tell that, their artwork are out there, and then collectors are still collecting them. So let me see. Okay, you can unmute yourself and ask questions. And let me see if I have additional question in the chat. Okay.
I have a question. Okay.
Yes.
I'm just curious, before this time frame that you're zooming in on, I'm really not educated in what happened before that briefly. Like the art was this without all the like extra things like the planes and things. Like, can you just tell us
Okay.
what's happening briefly?
Okay, I'm not sure where you are from. If you are near Washington, D.C., or if you visit Washington, D.C. next time, Smithsonian has, of course, like lots of different art collections. Smithsonian has a gallery called the Fried Gallery, Sackler and Fried. They are basically two, philanthropists that collected Chinese and Asia art, and then donated it to the Smithsonian, and the wing is named after them. But if you are, visiting the Smithsonian, visit the Frick and Sackler Gallery, or if you are in, because I don't know where you're located, but if you are in Chicago, New York, or wherever you are, usually they will have a wing. That is because a lot of art museums are dedicated by continent. Like these are European art, these are Asian art, and these are Egyptian art, these are African art. Usually they are divided by continent, all right? So go to your local museum and go to the Asia section. And since it's Asia, then it will, like depending on how big the museum is, it could have Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and some other Asian countries. But then if you look at those art, and you will probably see artwork. When I say traditional, like it's very hard to collect them. But then basically, when it comes to Chinese art, is emphasis on symbolism, emphasis on certain composition rules, and also because of symbolism, there are subjects that would not show up. For example, a skeleton, because when it comes to Chinese art, symbolism is so important. A lot of times, the symbolism are symbol of good things such as what you see during the Chinese New Year, that all represent good luck, prosperity. Like you go to a Chinese restaurant, if they have fish, there's always 9 of them, because it represents resourcefulness and good profit. I mean, things like that. So a lot of symbolism. And because of that, you will not see airplane, you will not see scout, you will not see a broken house, because it's almost like a bad omen, right? So those are subject matters that are new. And then, like maybe even, this afternoon I'm talking about chrysanthemum reimagined. And one of the reasons that I bring that up is because most individuals, when they learn brush painting, they usually start with the four gentlemen, and chrysanthemum is one of them. And a lot of times, myself included, when I teach, when I bring out chrysanthemum, I usually emphasize on the depiction of the leaf and how to use your brush sideways to have the light, medium, and dark, and display a blade of leaf that have light, medium, and dark, and also how to use like center stroke to depict the the typical arrangement of petals, right? Those are usually for beginners class. And then we move on to some other subject. And that's why I have the class this afternoon, because what I find out is that sometimes people are stuck here. And then chrysanthemum is such a beautiful flower. It doesn't make sense for us not to know how to draw them with, like with a different kind of stroke, how to draw them with a different kind of background, and how to draw them to combine the gombi, the meticulous style, with the spontaneous style, and then bring it up to a next level. So when it comes to Asian painting or classic painting, the subject matters, and also like certain way and expectation. And that's the brush painting at that time there. But as I say, it's very hard for me to like collectively say that painting was this, and then after Lingnan is that. I mean, no, there's no particular line. But basically, when you see the painting in the slideshow, these paintings shock the world or shock the viewers because of the subject matters, of the use of background, the use of light source, the depiction of I mean, like, if you have a time, Google literati painting that is very popular between the Yun, Ming, Shong, after the Shong dynasty, the Yun dynasty, Ming dynasty, and the Qing dynasty. The painting has, like, come to the point that they are talking about the spirit of the painting, the accents of subject, and sometimes over exaggerate the accents of the painting, and then the subject doesn't look like the real thing anymore. I'm sure that you have seen ego painting of really big eyes, really big mouth, but then if you look at a real ego, the eye is not this big, like as big as almost the head, or because, like you're talking about literati painting, but then there's a completely different history on that. All right. So let me see. I think I have additional
Thank
comment.
you.
Okay. Let's see. All right. Okay. So, do I have additional questions? Because I'm actually coming to the last 10 minutes of the time. I do know that some of you are actually joining the chrysanthemum class, and this will be recorded and posted on YouTube, and so it can be shared by people who are unable to join today. And I do give this kind of presentations to students and people who enroll in my online workshop once every other month, or sometimes if it's a holiday, maybe every 3 months. But then like I do cover that. So if you are interested, this, by the way, these are the Lingnan style azalea that will be on October 7th. If you are interested in the Lingnan painting, not next year, 2025 will be the 120th birthday of Zhao Xiao'an, and so there will be like really big celebration of Lingnan artists around the world. So like Zhao Xiao'an is really famous for his flower and bird painting. So if you are interested, that would be something. And I think Jenny, you have a questions?
Yes. I just want to know what's the major, I guess, difference between Lingnan style and to other Chinese brush painting styles?
Well, it really depends on who you ask. And but then usually people who call themselves Lingnan artists can actually trace back the teachers and then the like back to the three founders. And of course, since Chen Shu Ren never really have any students, so most people would be able to trace back to either Gao Jian Fu, who has the spring sleep, and also Lam Zhong, and many famous Chinese brush painter are from those two schools. And not sure whether you guys are familiar with a lot of Chinese artists, but for example, Guan San Yue, Lai Hong Choi, those are considered masters, and they were Lam Zhong's and Chen Shui students. And then for Gao Qi Feng, as I say, because Gao Qi Feng died relatively young, but then Gao Qi Feng has what we call Tian Feng Luk Zi, the 6 disciples of Heavenly Wind Academy. And these individuals also have influential paintings. And of course, since I'm from Hong Kong, and one particular artist who became extremely famous in Hong Kong and around the world is Jiao Xiaoang. Jiao Xiaoang is one of the students of Gao Qi Feng, and Jiao Xiaoang has art school. And not only that, Jiao Xiaoang's student established art school, and their student established art school. So you are talking about, in US, the more famous one are Jiao Xiaoang. Oh no, Jiao Xiaoang, more famous one are Henry Wu, Wu Yuge. And of course, in Chicago is Chen Haixiu, Andy Chen. And then in Canada is James Tang. And also William Ho is a student of, he learned from Jiao Xiaoang and also Henry Wu. So these are very famous artists. And so when we're talking about Lingnan, a lot of times we're talking about the painting style. Or at least today, a lot of times they are rounding back to the painting style of Jiao Xiaoang and Jiao Xiaoang students. But then that's also one of the reasons I want to have this presentation, because it's have to go beyond that. And I also want to not ignore Chen Shu Ren, who I think is very, I love his composition. It's so renovated even in today's thinking. And you're talking about painting that is like 100 years old. 100, not 10, 100 years old. Yeah. So
when you look at a Chinese painting, can you tell, okay, this is the Lingnan style painting? How can you tell?
Well, actually, it's not that, but then what, at least, it's a personal opinion now, okay? Because I'm sure that there may be people from Lingnan who argue with me and say that, no, I don't agree with you, because you're talking about opinion now. Art is kind of like, art, it's very abstract, okay? For me, it's not really whether it's Lingnan style. It's basically what Lingnan school excel in. Lingnan school excel in what? In my opinion, which is only Joan Lok opinion, I think Lingnan style excel in, one of the first thing is the use of opaque white, the use of white powder collision, opaque white to depict 3D texture of flowers and animal as well. The use of opaque white, the white powder. Another one, the use of water. The use of water that is, the use of water and the water mixing on the paper, which is also very unique. 撞粉撞水, right? And of course, subject matter. And as a matter of fact, and that's why there are some negative comment about, it was new 100 years ago, but what is it new now? We have seen airplane 100 years ago. So why is, airplane is no longer new now, right? But I can tell you, I don't know about others. I have not seen it, but I have put a telescope in a Sumier painting just like 2 years ago. I think that some of my students knew that because you have seen it, right? I have put the Webb telescope into a Sumier painting and I mailed it to Hong Kong, and it was in the Lingnan Zhao Xiaoang birthday show. And everybody were kind of like, oh, but that's exactly what we should be pushing. We should be pushing subject matters. So I put a telescope in a Chinese brush painting. And I think that's the spirit of Lingnan. So what is Lingnan is not really kind of like like what is American or what is, why do you call yourself a New Yorker? I mean, it's not like, do you have to be born in New York to be a New Yorker? Do you have to at least live in New York for 10 years to be a New Yorker? Or do you have to have a Yankee accent to be a New Yorker? I would say yes and no on all that. Because if you're born in New York, you could call yourself a New Yorker, but then maybe you're born in New York, but you're raised in Tennessee. Then are you still a New Yorker? Or if you live there for 10 years or even 1 year or 1 month, I mean, is there a line? So no, I would probably say that, like, how do we define what is Lingnan? I would probably say that, I will tell you that the characteristic of Lingnan art, or what Lingnan excelled in, what white powder collision, use of opaque white, water collision, use of water to depict the 3D, the bringing of Western into the East, because Lingnan a lot of times is summarized in 8 words, and with a lack of very sophisticated translation, is 折衷中外融匯古今. You compromise, you merge the East and the West, and then you bring out the best of the old and the new, and that's Lingnan. Lingnan is to bring the new subject, bring the new composition, bring the new technique, but yet honor the old, and then synthesize them, mix them together, and make that into your own. And to me, that's Lingnan. That's the new spirit of modern painting. Right?
Nice. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So do I have any other questions? Let me see. I have 2 more comments. Okay. Yeah. So I am actually at the very end of the time frame. So I know that some of you are coming to my chrysanthemum workshop. So we do need to eat something. And I thank everybody for coming. We do want to, keep that. And I just want to let you know that, after I post it on YouTube, this is the first time I asked, but maybe subscribe and like and see what happened. I don't know what will happen, okay? But subscribe and like and see what happened, all right? But thank you everybody for joining me. I really appreciate you coming and spending the time. And I have various things planned in the future, but may not be lately. But as I mentioned, 2025 is the 120th birthday of Zhao Xiaoang. So I have a gut feeling that, for the anniversary, I will have a presentation about Zhao Xiaoang, because I think it's just so cool to do that. And then I haven't decided what to do in 2024 yet. But if you have any suggestions, let me know. We will be more than happy. I'll be more than happy to do that. And this presentation is out of, honestly, pretty massive research and investigation. So I hope that you find it helpful, or at least it sparked your interest to look further into these individuals, their life and their art. And hopefully you'll be inspired by them, and hopefully become better artists. So thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.